talk is about an experiment that I did, a field experiment, and sort of the journey of boundary control in research. And it's something that we all learned about in the pandemic, and I think the meanings of it have shifted over time. And one of the things that I think is interesting is over the pandemic, we talked about our heroes, our grocery store workers, our people that worked in healthcare, the front line, the police, and then we've kind of forgotten about them. And I think we can still do more at a policy level. And so that's sort of the goal here, is have you, who are all interested in boundaries, to move it from the individual level to the policy level and think about what we can do to rethink boundaries control for the front line. But here are work-life boundaries, and this is obviously something that we all are struggling with every day with the growing connectivity of work and the smartphones. And we can work in so many different places. And so a lot of us, and myself, and this is what I studied, right? I was a young grad student at Yale University, had a child after being married like 3 years. And some of you have heard this story before, but when's the worst time to have a baby in academia? September. And so, and at that time they did not have work-life leave or maternity leave for professors, let alone doctoral students. That's an example of a continuity of work boundary. And so I ended up staying in because I would have had to reapply for a fellowship in a year, wouldn't you? I had funding. And so, oh boy, I showed them. I finished in 4 years. Was that such a good way to manage boundaries? Probably not, but it made me very interested in this area. So early on, I worked with Center for Creative Leadership, and I'm studying individual boundary management tactics. And some of you are separators. You like to work in chunks, and maybe you only do personal calls on the weekends or not during work time. Others of us are multitasking all the time, which we all did during the pandemic and remote work. And then how we manage interruptions links to our identity. And we have a choice, for more family-centric, we can reallocate our day, restructure our day to do more for family, and then integrate at different times in the evenings. And we have some control and autonomy as professionals. But there are many people that do not have this work-life privilege, and it is privilege. And so we talk about overwork, but boy, we can get a text knowing that our child got home off the bus. We can make calls to the doctor during work time. We can structure appointments. And so I moved the discussion, and I still care very much about professionals and styles. And I've actually given workshops in 24/7 nursing homes on boundary management styles. And sometimes this manager who was head of the healthcare system at the nursing home said, I wish my wife wouldn't keep calling me at work. I just want to get out of here. So we have the permeability going in both directions. And I want you to think about now retail and moving to frontline work. And this is something I've studied in retail for over a decade. I want you to meet Sue. Sue works in the produce department, and she has the problem of forced segmentation, which Rosabeth Cantor wrote about years ago. But she cannot get a call during work time. She can get it on her break. And about 25% of employers, such as the big box stores, make people lock up their cell phones during work time, and they don't trust them to be able to get a text or email. Think about if all the emails and texts you might have sent that were personal during a work day. So the idea here for Sue is, can we give her more boundary control during the day to be able to integrate important life events? Now let's meet Mary, Sue's manager. Mary has a different problem. She has boundary control issues in terms of extended availability. They're cutting staff at many of our operations. In retail, Mary's just one level above the hourly worker. We've all been at the cash register where somebody says, we need a manager to deal with this exception. Mary's an hourly worker in many cases in retail, but she's called a manager. And she'll get called at home when the freezer breaks, when somebody can't find the broom, when somebody wants Saturday off. So Mary needs a way to not have to be on 27 days a week, but have that one day off. So here we have this issue of our little smartphone, and managing control over the work-non-work boundary is a growing challenge of contemporary workplace. And employers and employees have increasingly different interests and beliefs on how boundaries should be managed, particularly in regards to electronic communications. At the same time, we have these macroeconomic changes, increased automation of retail, growing competition, because now everywhere from Amazon to your Walmart is selling food. It's not just grocery stores. They're cutting staff. They're not making a lot of money. And this is trickling down to how we manage work-life boundaries with the workers and the beliefs about what is good service. How many of us have been in a store or going through a line, perhaps at the airport, Homeland Security, and we see people on their cell phones? We think they're not doing our job, but we probably all day long are switching back and forth as well. So this idea of regulating cell phones, communications, personal devices at work, only at breaks at many companies. In some large organizations, they cut off some of the internet when you go into work as well for personal contact. And then the other issue is having people contact you when you finally get home and you just don't want to think about work for one day off. And I remember interviewing one of my students who had just taken a job at a manufacturing plant, and her boss at this plant would call her on the weekends about problems. And these are things that where you really do need time for recovery. So what is boundary control? I'm thinking it in terms of policies and cultures that gives people increased non-work control on the job, to be able to let non-work issues permeate into the workplace when we need it, like Sue, and also Mary, maybe a single parent or may have other issues as well and wants to be able to take those calls. And then increased work control off the job to prevent work job creep. So I just throw this up here as an org chart. I'd like you in your future studies, or if you're a practitioner, think about the organization where you work and the context. And grocery stores are wonderful to study because you can see different boundary control pressures at each level. So you have the employees, or we call them associates, at the first level. And then you have every department, your produce market, your meat market, the front of the house market. Those are those hourly frontline managers. And then you have a store director. And so I was able to look at levels of boundary control, because often the culture for boundary control is set by the senior management as to terms of beliefs about what we think about productivity. Think about all the back to the office mandates we're currently struggling with in our society as well. I did a field experiment, and basically what I did is in 23 grocery stores, because I'm interested in organizational level context that sets the culture and context for how we manage boundaries. We did 2 work-life surveys about, I believe it was about eight weeks apart. And we had usual practice and measured how employees and their the managers and then the store directors, some beliefs about work-life relationships, job satisfaction, stress, and well-being. Then in the other 23 stores, I worked with them, I did qualitative interviews, and we came up with a policy change that dealt with those 2 types of boundary control. And then we trained the managers on how to implement it, because often there's a policy change, but the managers don't know how to implement these things. And then we collected data again. And basically, you can think about then 3 levels of effects. You can look at the intervention, how does it affect employees? That's an indirect or distal impact. It's kind of like training parents to be better in how they manage their children, support their children's boundary control. The same with the leaders. How are they supporting their employees' needs for boundary control? And then we have the frontline hourly managers, and are those store directors calling them all the time, or employees calling them? So you can see in each store had its own culture of boundary control. And let me talk through then what we did in terms of the cell phone policy. And one of the things we did was we first told employees they were allowed to take a cell phone call or a text if they knew they're getting a doctor's call or call from a family or friend, and they could step off the line and their boss would step in at the cash register or the station so they could get communications anytime during the workday, not just at break. The other aspect of the policy change is we told workers or employees, don't call your boss at home if you need Saturday off. Tell the people at the store that you need it off, and basically respect their time off. So I developed a couple scales, respecting time off, boundary control, and here's what we found. One of the things we found is that in the stores, so this is store level, and weren't able to train every manager in the store. It was just a tipping point of at least 30% of the managers did the training. You can't force managers to do work-life training. That sort of counters the impact. We found that employees reported increased boundary control in stores where we did the intervention. Whether or not employees actually stepped off the floor or not, the culture shifted. And we also found this idea of work cell phone facilitation. The employees had their cell phones on them. They were able to get texts and emails. It was silenced, but they started using their cell phone to help people and customers at work. So instead of that belief that cell phones are going to get in the way of productivity, it'd be like, oh, I'm buying this cake mix, but I can't, find how to decorate it. And they start showing pictures and using the cell phone to help each other and coworkers and also the customers. And then in terms of the cell phone manager, he was able to then have time off, and they had better recovery and well-being off the job. So boundary control is a form of work-life equality across occupations. And what is equality? The ability to be able to integrate when you want to, the ability to be able to separate from work when you want to, and to not have forced alignment of the organization's needs always superseding personal life demands, but it's work-life balance for well-being. And every job should have some form of boundary control, and individuals do vary in how they want to manage boundaries during the workday, but this should be some choice and freedom to live your life the way you would like to live it. We could take some of these ideas of respecting time off and managing permeability or be able to get personal calls when it's an emergency at work is something that we all struggle with. And can we make this some way a basic right across occupations? Because we all know that there were times where there was a family emergency, someone was not able to address it, or does it have to be an emergency? Can it be just something, the well-being that you know that somebody was taking care of while you were at work, and then you could go back and focus on work. And the same with recovery. We've all had those days where we've wanted to turn off our emails and cell phones and been contacted, and then we look like we're not engaged. So I think organizations need to come up with these norms, and policies can help give broad direction, and then socialize leaders and employees as to how to implement new ways of working for boundary control on and off the job. Thank you very much.